And they were distinctly worried, I recall, that there was an attempt to radicalize the Maldives. Initially we had thought of a beach assault, but then that was vetoed, and because it would take too much time to mount. And then it was decided to launch a para-drop operation. The Chinese PLA has given 7 submarines, air-independent propulsion submarines, to Pakistan. They've given them many capital ships, and they are trying to strengthen the Pakistani Navy. The famous island resorts of Maldives have been in the news lately for all the wrong reasons. Let's give it a bit of context and background. The word Maldives comes from the Sanskrit Maladweep and the Tamil Malai Tivu. Now, Malai Tivu means an island with a lot of hills. The Maldives archipelago, it has 1,190 islands total over an area of some 90,000 square kilometers of the sea. Only 200 of these islands are inhabited. That means there are a lot of vacant islands, empty islands, which could be misused in any future contingency by terrorists or smugglers and the like. This is a very geostrategic location. You know, the Diego Garcia Island, the major base of the United States in the Indian Ocean, is just about a few hundred miles from here. The Lakshadweep group of islands of India, they are almost just about 200 kilometers away, the nearest one. So it is an extremely strategic location which strides the, the sea routes of communication, the sea lines of communications, the so-called slocks, and therefore its occupation by any hostile power, especially China, could prove to be very, very dangerous to India, and India cannot afford to have its national security interests compromised. China has been very desperately trying to gain a foothold in the Maldives. It tried to make it a part of its maritime Silk Route, and it has been using the ISI as a cat's paw to destabilize and radicalize the Maldives. Let's get into a bit of recent military history. In the year of the Lord 1988, I was serving in the Military Operations Directorate when India had to launch Operation Cactus to rescue the Maldives, right? A group of terrorists of the plot, People's Liberation Organization of Tamil Eelam, led by Abdullah Lutfi, about 150 to 200 armed terrorists had landed at Malé, and they had taken over the Maldives. They had tried to capture the president, but the Maldivian security forces, the Maldivian defense forces, they very adroitly, they whisked him away from the presidential palace and put him in a safe house, which was there earmarked for such contingencies. They requested India for help. So I was in the Military Operations Directorate when this happened, and as I was saying, luckily for us, the Mr. Banerjee, then ambassador to the Maldives, India's ambassador to the Maldives, was in Delhi on some leave. So we contacted him quickly. He was brought to the operations room because very little was known about the Maldives, and with his help the operation was planned. Initially we had thought of a beach assault, but then that was vetoed, and because it would take too much time to mount. And then it was decided to launch a para-drop operation over the Maldives to rescue that island state. The initial plans were 3 IL-76 Russian Illusion aircraft, transport aircraft. They would take this the para brigade, and they were to be airdropped over the Maldives island. But then the para brigade protested that it was very narrow longitudinal islands, and almost 50% or more of the para dropped personnel would fall into the sea. So that would lead to a lot of casualties, and it would slow down the getting together of that force for launching operations, and that warning would be adequate for the 150, 200 odd terrorists there in Maldives to put up a much better defense fight street by street kind of a thing. So ultimately we launched the operation 3rd, 4th November. Around the evening, last light, these aircraft took off for the Maldives, and we had 6 para, 1 company of 3 para, and we had a battery of the para-field artillery and some engineers. These were flown in these 3 Illusion aircraft, and by 8 o'clock they were over the Malé airfield. They established radio contact, and we were very worried whether the terrorists had taken over the airport. It was the most logical thing to do, but for some, luckily for us, they did not do the most obvious thing. The airfield appeared to be unheld, so Brigadier Balsara, the brigade commander, he decided to take that risk. He was leading the operation personally. He decided to take that risk, and he landed on the Malé airfield. And quickly they first of all rescued President Gayoom, Abdul Gayoom, the president of the Maldives, and then they went on and secured the whole of the capital. The terrorists led by Abdullah Lutufi, they were suddenly taken by complete shock to them as to how people had landed from the air, and a rescue attempt had been mounted with such great speed. But they, finally, when they decided the game was up, they took the education minister of Maldives along with his Swedish wife hostage and a few other Maldivian citizens hostage. They hijacked a commercial ship and they took off. So even though the island was secured, we had now to deal with a hostage situation. So the Indian Navy sent in its IL-38 maritime reconnaissance aircraft. They spotted the ship, and 2 of our frigates, the Betwa and Godavari, they were sent to rescue, to mount the rescue operation. So they came on either side of this ship, and then they asked him to surrender. They refused. They said they would kill 1 hostage every hour if we did not call off this operation. But then a risk was taken. We opened fire on the ship. We disabled the ship's engine, and then finally the people, then they surrendered, and they were asked to put the hostages on one deck and them on the the backside of the ship. And then the Marcos landed and they rescued. This is how this operation ended. I've given you this operation in very great detail to highlight to you how closely the security of India and the Maldives are interlinked, are aligned. If any problem happens in the Maldives, whether created by terrorists, humans, hostile forces, or by the hostility of nature, tsunami, etc., the first responder will always be India. Therefore, we have a kind of a symbiotic relationship which has been there for decades now, decades. The governments in the Maldives have usually been very, very friendly to us. In the year 2008, when I was a Major General, I had become a Major General and I was teaching at the National Defense College, I had taken a team, a study team from the National Defense College, NDC, to the Maldives, and we'd spent about a week there. Those are beautiful islands, they're very friendly people, very, by nature they are soft-spoken and gentle, and it's an ideal tourist paradise. But even then I recall, the government then was very liberal. I was impressed with the ministers that I interacted with. They were well educated, very soft, very urban. But they expressed to me the fears, especially the Maldivian head of the Maldivian Defense Forces then, that they were worried about the radicalization of the island that was being done with the support of Pakistan's ISI. And there were a number of people, merchants from the Maldives, who were going to Saudi Arabia, to Kuwait, getting back large amount of funds and setting up new mosques and radicalizing people with vicious sermons in the mosques. And then there were these propaganda inflammatory tapes, and later with the growth of the ISIS, Islamic State, the situation had taken a turn for the worse. They were extremely worried because they said that the number of the men with short pajamas, which is a sign of radicalization, is increasing. Normally the Maldivian girls, they wear the Iranian type shawl around their heads, but there were the number of girls who were wearing complete full length burqas from head to toe, that was on the increase. And they were distinctly worried, I recall, that there was an attempt to radicalize the Maldives. The Chinese seem to be behind this. They were very keen. They had told the Maldivian government that they would create an island. Don't forget that they have created many artificial islands in the South China Sea, the disputed South China Sea, and established military bases there. So they had offered to the government of the Maldives that they would create a new island there in that archipelago, and that they wanted it as a base, quite obviously. They were trying to include the Maldives in their maritime Silk Road, and when they found that it wasn't working, they tried to increase the number of tourists, Chinese tourists, which went up to about 1.2 lakhs and more. That is 1.2 to 1.5 lakh Chinese tourists started visiting the Maldives every year to have Maldives to get an economic stake in the relationship with China. So they were extremely worried. By 2012, things had become far more serious. There were some Maldivian youth who were badly radicalized, and they were also, the ISI was pumping in drugs to get, control zombies, which is the standard operating technique of the ISI. They were trying to get a whole lot of these Maldivian youths radicalized. Right. The problem is that they have very good education up to the school level in the Maldives, at least in that time it was there, but there were very few colleges. And for these colleges, they had to either go out of the country, and only the very rich could afford that. It was beyond the reach of the ordinary Maldivian students. And I do think that India should now, I think, step in and try and have programs to get Maldivian students here so that they get secular modernist educations and they don't go back as hardened terrorists and drug addicts. That will have to be prevented, because that is what the ISI was trying to do. The ISI was the cat's paw for the Chinese because of the Muslim population there. The Chinese depended upon the ISI to create such. You would be amazed to learn that there were Maldivian terrorists then, and there about almost 200 of them had gone over to fight in Syria for the ISIS. And some of them, quite obviously, when they returned, when they took a beating there, they are the radicalization agents to radicalize the entire population of the Maldives. Now, you see, Maldives is a nation whose economy depends upon tourism primarily. I mean, the prime earner of foreign exchange is tourism, and then of course the tuna fish that they export. Besides that, Maldives has nothing. These islands can only survive if there is tourism. Tourism and terrorism don't match. They don't make a symbiotic mix. I'm sorry. The government and the people of Maldives will have to make a choice whether they want to get tourists or they want to get terrorists. The Chinese PLA has given 7 submarines, air-independent propulsion submarines, to Pakistan. They have given them many capital ships, and they are trying to strengthen the Pakistani Navy. The Pakistani Navy has been getting increasingly aggressive and assertive in this part of the southern Arabian Sea and also the northern quadrant of the Indian Ocean region. The Pakistani Navy has been getting very assertive. They have been trying to hold exercises in this quadrant of the Indian Ocean region, northern quadrant, as also southern Arabian Sea. they've been trying to get very assertive in terms of holding exercises. So the Pakistani Navy has been trying to get very assertive and aggressive in this southern portion of the Arabian Sea and the northern quadrant of the Indian Ocean region, which is a cause for serious concern. The Chinese, as we are all aware, have enunciated their string of pearls policy to surround India with a series of naval bases. It's part of their the standard Chinese strategy, which is based upon their game, their equivalent of the game of chess, Wei Qi, in which you surround your opponent. The entire strategy is based upon surrounding your enemy from all sides, and that encirclement by itself sort of brings about his defeat. This is what the Chinese believe. So they have been going the extra mile to create a string of pearls around India, which starts from the port of Hangui in Myanmar, and the Colombo port and the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. As also they are trying to secure bases in Thailand, they are trying to secure bases in the Maldives. I mean, those are India's geostrategic concerns. And any government in the Maldives, I'm afraid, cannot be oblivious to these concerns, cannot invite. India will not permit them to, let China establish bases, etc. To help the government and the people of Maldives, India always has had very close symbiotic relationship with the Maldivian defense forces, and we had given them a chopper, a helicopter, and some naval patrol boats. We had helped them to establish radars on the Maldivian islands to scan, to keep a track of any hostile activity, and also the shipping lanes and activity there. We are all seeing how the Red Sea is becoming active in terms of piracy, in terms of attacks on shipping. Somalia, we've just rescued one of our one ship with 15 Indian sailors, which had been hijacked by Somalian pirates. And one would not be surprised if, based on the support given by the ISI, this piracy kind of action is, terrorist kind of action is asserted. And who knows? We could have a Maldivian coup redux. We could have a redux of the 1988 coup that was staged by Abdullah Lutfi. 200 terrorists has sufficed to take over that island nation, that micro-state. The Maldivian defense forces are much stronger now, much better trained, and most of them have been trained by India, though some of them have been going to Pakistan too. And also they go to the United Kingdom. But the fact of the matter is that they may be able to put up better resistance, but still the threat is very much there. The threat is very much there. And I'd like to mention that in 2016, as the editor of the Indian Military Review, we had conducted war games to sort of how would India deal with a scenario if there was sudden increase in radicalization and an overthrow of the democratic regime in Maldives. And then we had put it in the form of a fictional scenario. This book called Maelstrom Rising was about a contingency, such contingencies in the Maldives. Unfortunately for us, this contingency of the radicalization of the Maldives and possibly it taking a lurch towards China or Pakistan, and has become reality with the present government. The present president, in his election campaign, had made a big thing out of the so-called Indian military presence in the Maldives. This is just a helicopter and some patrol boats, with the help of which we've been evacuating people who are sick from the islands and helping in local emergencies or little accidents that do take place there. We've been doing it for the government and the people of Maldives, and the previous governments have all expressed a lot of gratitude. But the present regime has made it a matter of prestige that they want to get the Indian military presence out, and ever since he has taken over, negotiations are in place. We all thought that that was rhetoric for the electioneering in Maldives, which would appeal. They were trying to win over the radicalized voters in the Maldives. But the fact is that he has gone ahead. The first visit that the current president of the Maldives made was to Turkey. It was to give a clear indication to India as to what unfortunately his thinking was. Now Turkey has been getting unduly assertive all over the world. It has been trying to set itself up as the new caliphate, as the center of the new caliphate, and the primary power in the Islamic world. And as part of that, there have been unsubstantiated reports, but of very, very fair credibility, that Turkey was planning to send about 3,000 trained armed terrorists to fight in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, if this is the mindset and you make it a point to make your first visit to Turkey, then you are sending out signals which could be a reason for very great disquiet in India. Traditionally, the first trip any Maldivian president makes on assumption of office is to New Delhi, because of the very symbiotic nature of our relationship, the very close relationship which has been going on for so many years now. So, instead of that, it is now learned that he is the first visit that the new Maldivian president will make will go to China. Now, with all these disquieting factors, there has been a new development. Our Prime Minister had gone to the Lakshadweep island for a visit, and his photographs were flashed all over the Indian social media, and it suddenly struck us that this is just 200 odd kilometers from the Maldives at all, and it is as beautiful, if not more beautiful. So, I mean, why have we not exploited this island? One of the primary reasons is on the basis of the very fragile ecology of these islands. These can't stand up to mass tourism that would destroy the fragile ecosystem. But the fact of the matter is that we could definitely go in for high-end tourism. And suddenly the Indian social media was awash. People were very upset with the Maldives, and especially when two junior Maldivian ministers made crass racist comments that Indian hotels, their rooms would smell of curry and what have you. I mean, and they more or less used intemperate and abusive language against the Prime Minister of India, no less. This has created outrage on the social media, and the social media is rife with suggestions that Indian tourism, tourists should stop going to the Maldives. And when 2.5 lakh tourists are suddenly taken off Maldives, you can see the impact on the Maldivian economy. Any gentleman with a modicum of common sense can understand. Like I said, Maldives may have to choose between tourism and terrorism. What does it want to become? A center of tourism or a center of jihadi terrorism? That would be the ruin of the Maldives. The second thing that one would like to caution our friends in Maldives is they are trying to get very close to China. You don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Just because some jihadi hotheads in the Maldives want to spite India, want to spoil their relationship with India, the traditional time-tested relationship with India. You want to lean towards China, you want to depend on China economically, then please stop, pause for a minute and take a look at what has happened in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, Any country that the Chinese have given their loans to, that has been the economic ruin of that country. The Chinese loans are given at very high rates of interest. They suck the lifeblood out of that country. Most of the infrastructure projects that they created in Pakistan, in Nepal for instance, are lying useless. Those countries cannot pay back, and then the Chinese start asserting themselves. They forced Sri Lanka to cede the port of Hambantota for about on a 100 years lease. They have done similar things in Myanmar. They are trying to do the similar thing with the Gwadar port in Pakistan. Today, Pakistan's economy is on the brink of meltdown and ruin. Sri Lankan economy had come to complete meltdown and ruin. The government of Rajapaksa was overthrown. Similar problems have started to now surface in Nepal. Any country that has joined the Belt Road Initiative, taken massive Chinese loans, has come to grief. So please keep that in mind. Your closest first responder is India. Because of very geographical reasons, the destinies of the two nations are tied together. There is a lot of liberal, well-educated Maldivians who fully understand this, who are very well disposed towards India, but unfortunately in the recent elections, the radicalization seems to now be showing its effects at a larger scale. Initially it was just minuscule, combined to a few college students who were onto drugs, who were onto hashish, who were on to even harder things like heroin, which was being pumped in by the ISI. It was a minuscule minority. Today that minority is becoming vocal, assertive, and emotionally Islamic radicalization can be very heady, but it takes nations to their ruin. For God's sake, see what has happened to Afghanistan, see what has happened to nations like Syria, and you can well make out that this kind of a radicalization is the road to ruin. The highway to ruin nation of a country is radicalization. So especially a very prosperous country, economically well-off country, which has tourism as its primary source of income, which has the export of tuna fish. The export of tuna fish will still continue. But the fact of the matter is that if tourism takes a hit, I'm afraid the Maldivian economy would collapse. It is a dire scenario, but it is something that the Maldivian government will have to be very, very considerate, give very calm and cool consideration to their overall direction, strategic direction that the state is taking, just because they want to play upon the emotions of a highly somewhat radicalized sections of their population. I mean, they cannot be ignorant of their own prime national interests, national security interests, economic interests, and the well-being of the Maldivian people. What should India do in the circumstances? I think India will have to be patient, but we should make it very clear to the present government of the Maldives that the adoption of hostile postures would be to the detriment of the people of Maldives itself, to the economy of the Maldives itself. It would help them to have good relations, continue the traditional good relations with India. We should see that their youth is not radicalized, and what we can do to help is to establish colleges in India, give them economic packages to come and study in India, whether it is management, whether it is on the tourism industry, whether it deals with medical profession, legal profession, etc. There are so many excellent centers of education coming up and already in existence in India, and we have such a large number of students from the third world countries coming and studying here. So the first thing that we need to do is increase the size of the student welfare program. And then we have to see what are the leverages that India has to influence policy making in Maldives, in Malé. And we do have one hell of a lot of leverages. India should not be forced by the present regime to exercise these leverages, because it would lead to bad relations, would be to the detriment of both the countries. The geostrategic location of Maldives is vital and critical. India cannot afford to let Maldives slip into radicalization, Islamization, and become a base for the spread of terrorism in India. This is not a wild card scenario. It is what the ISI has been trying to do for a number of years. Some years back, Pakistani charge d'affaires was working in Sri Lanka, and in Colombo he had to be deported because he was recruiting, the Sri Lankan youth, Maldivian youth for terrorist activities. There is a ISI plan that they find that the entire border with India from Kashmir to the Rann of Kutch has been very well fenced and sealed. So they found it very difficult to have infiltrate drugs, money, weapons, explosives and the armed terrorists into India from the western borders. Then they switched to trying to come into India via Nepal. When even that route was blocked, they tried to come via Bangladesh. The Bangladesh government has taken very active measures to see that no terrorists come to India from that route, from via Bangladesh. Then the ISI hit upon the brilliant idea of trying to recruit Maldivian youth, Sri Lankan youth and try and create mayhem in South India, where they have been trying to establish or set up their agents and make their minions buy land along the highways, along this thing, set up hotels, set up little chawls which would be useful in trying to spread terrorism into southern India, which is hitherto been spared, which has hitherto been quiet. One of the key links in this spread of terrorism via the south would be the Maldives. I am very certain the Maldives government would not like to reduce itself to a base for the spread of terrorism, but that would invite consequences and repercussions. Even the Americans are very worried about the spread of Chinese influence in the Maldives, about the spread of Wahhabism in the Maldives. The original Hanafi religion, which was never, Hanafi sect of Islam was never so rigid or never so radical as they are now trying to make it with the help of propagation of the ISI propaganda, dissemination of ISI propaganda via the social net. There has been a definite program to radicalize the Maldivian youth, and that has long-term security consequences for the entire region in general and India in particular. Thank you.